Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for your continued support. And one of the first things I want to talk about before I introduce my guest today is CureFest. I've talked about how incredible it is of an event to not only meet other people that are going through this, have been part of this community in some way, whether it is warriors, survivors, parents, families, organizations, but also it is an incredible opportunity to be able to collaborate after and see how strong of a voice we can be as one collaborative. So I'm so excited today to be able to introduce my guest, who I had the honor of being next to at CureFest this year in Freedom Plaza before everything went to hell in a handbasket at the end of the night. But nevertheless, we had the opportunity to be next to each other and kind of I got to see her energy, which is just incredible. I can't keep up, but we're gonna go with that. She is the founder of Behold Be Gold, which is a movement meant to spread advocacy, awareness, survivor voices, and really talk about late-term side effects. And before I introduce, I want to say that late-term side effects are something that often get forgotten about when it comes to children that are battling cancer, because we don't think very far beyond the 5. So I'm hoping today we can hear a little bit more about that, and you'll take away from this podcast that everything after you ring the bell or everything after cancer is quote unquote over is so much more of a battle than really anybody thinks about. So today, my guest is Juanita Prada from Behold Be Gold. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Curtis. I appreciate you having me, and I'm very honored to be here on your podcast. Very amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. So tell me a little bit, kind of go a little bit about your story as what your connection is to pediatric cancer, how you became connected and part of this community, and how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, so I became, I always say it's unfortunate to be part of this community, and at the same time, you are in it and you become just wowed and stunned of all the amazing support that you have it around you. So unfortunately, I got diagnosed with childhood cancer at the age of 10 with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, cancer of the blood. And this happened in 2003. And back then, there was really not much awareness like we have today. And I still feel like we need so much awareness about it, of course. But back when I was diagnosed, there wasn't much programs such as like Child Life or lots of organizations and foundations. For instance, my first language is Spanish. There wasn't an interpreter back then. Just things that really are so needed and so crucial when you're in the hospital setting and being diagnosed specifically with childhood cancer. But anyways, I got diagnosed at the age of 10, and it was a quick, not quick, but it took a few weeks to get diagnosed. I am from Colombia originally, but moved to the States when I was very little with my family, and my dad went back home to go to his brother's funeral. At the time, I stayed home with my stepmom during this period, and everything was so quick when it happened, and everything was like a dream, but so surreal at the same time. All of a sudden, I felt a few weeks before starting 5th grade, I started feeling very fatigued. I started feeling very, just very, very tired. I started feeling headaches. I started seeing my body being covered up with bruises. I was limping in my right leg. I'll never forget that. It was yesterday, and I just remember complaining about it. But we were, my parents, my caregivers were just kind of like the adults around me were just like giving me Tylenol and just really saying, well, these probably are growing pains. 5th grade's about to start. Let's get you excited about getting stuff for school, etc. So, anyways, I was excited to see back my friends after summer. And then the first week started, and then right towards the middle of the week is when I went to the nurse's station, and I just couldn't. I went to the nurse's station. I had a really high fever of 100 and I remember like 110, something like that. And straight to the hospital we went. My dad at this point already was informed of me not feeling so well. He quickly took a flight back to the US, and we went to several doctors after doctor after doctor, and this is nothing, right into the emergency room when it really got really bad, right to the hematology oncology clinic out here in my local town with some blood tests, then diagnosed me with childhood cancer, leukemia. Right there, my stepmom, the doctors told my stepmom there's no time to go home. There's no time for anything. Really, Juanita needs to stay here. We need to start treatment right now. When this moment happened, there was obviously stuff going on in the background that I wasn't sure about what was happening. Because hanging and feeling awful, I did get set aside into a room. I did kind of see like my parents were just very serious, and they didn't really let tears out, but very serious. And they let the doctor come into the room, very, very cold room, fluorescent lights. I have this poem that I read every time I do a public speaking engagement, and it hits home. Lots of tears afterwards when I speak about it. But I say, 10 years old, empty room, fluorescent lights, something, how did this get so bad? But the doctor came in, started rubbing my back. I'll never forget. And she told me, Juanita, honey, you have leukemia, you have cancer. And so at this moment, I was like, oh my goodness, cancer. And I quickly associated cancer with dying. And then I quickly associated cancer with my hair falling out. And I remember those were the two big things, but it was mainly my hair falling out and me being different than my friends. And all of a sudden, I knew that this meant this was something very, very serious, and that I will probably not be able to attend school and be pulled away, and my hair falling out, and my hair falling out, and my hair falling out, and picturing these commercials that you see from St. Jude's commercials. And oh my gosh, everything was just, the world ends for you. And at that moment, like I said, it's so surreal. And the fluorescent lights was really that moment of, that's all I saw at the moment, everything. And so afterwards, like I said, my parents got sent home to get my stuff. Obviously, one parent stayed with me. And quickly, I remember getting a portacath. To be honest with you, I don't remember much, but I've been told so many times that kind of little by little, I kind of start trying to picture myself, but at the same time, little by little, remembering little stuff. And going to the surgery room to get the portacath in to be able to start treatment, and everything was happening so fast. And then doctors, surgeons were putting in my portacath. There was an infection that was happening called Klebsiella cellulitis. And I've been saying that word so many times now that it sounds so big and scary. And obviously it was big and scary, but it just sounds like I've never would have, I've been learning that word, Klebsiella cellulitis, and nowadays I'm an adult, I look it up, and it's just like, wow. And just the surgery went completely wrong. And that caused me to quickly go straight into a state of coma for a month. So everything, your child has cancer, or child's going to the procedure, you have to be staying at the hospital, there's no time to go home, your child now is in a state of coma, not waking up. My dad and my mom at the time, of course, I said I have a stepmom, so they were not together, but my dad called my mom saying, you have to come here, doctors. My mom at that moment, she did find out about my cancer through that day and everything that was happening. But through that afterwards state of coma for a month, my mom got called from my dad saying, you need to come. Juanita is not going to survive. The doctors say that this is a very, 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 very low probability that Juanita is going to get out of the state of coma and survive. So it happened, everything so fast. And my mom came, my dad told him, you're going to come, ready to say goodbye. And then I don't know how to explain this, but I felt like there was so many things in my life that were chaotic in that time. Of course, this is huge. A diagnosis of cancer at a young age, out of the nowhere, perfect, healthy, jumpy child, happy, bubbly. And then later on, this happened. And in the room, you could feel the energy of kind of like the people who were mourning me, and then the people who were kind of still keeping that faith and that hope. And my mom coming in, I felt was definitely needed. And I felt, and she felt, that sense of like the energy and the spirituality that came kind of behind it. She also that day brought a priest and, prayed over me, and she sang over me, and anointed me. And it just felt like there was some bizarre energy in there that got me out of that state of coma. And I started, now the coma went from a stroke. And so the stroke, doctor said everybody was amazed and shocked when this happened, when I got out of that state of coma. And now the coma led to the stroke, and the doctors came in, analyzed me, and now after some exams and everything, they said Juanita now has a brain of a 4-year-old instead of a 10-year-old. And now that meant there were many setbacks, and there was many, my whole life trajectory changed after that. And now Juanita needed to relearn all her activities of daily living. Juanita had to relearn how to pick up a pen. Juanita had to relearn how to walk, how to talk, spatial abilities. I remember when I would be home, and which wasn't, it was very rare for me to be home, but when I was home one day, putting, for instance, the forks and the spoons beside me and the cup in front of me and all that, I didn't understand how that went. So there was a lot of things of rehabilitation that I had to do, all the types of therapies a person can think of, I had to do. And I was inpatient for a year straight. I did not come out of the hospital for a year, and all I knew was the doctors, the nurses, the medical staff, the adults, the child life specialists, just the environment of being in a hospital, and just kind of very rare, like I said, if I was able to go home, just seeing my siblings and very little amount of friends because of the infections and all that stuff. And so little by little, I was gaining mobility again. But again, from a year, I was like in diapers at 10 years old, and all that really set the tone. I mean, I'm sure just me by telling you the story, you can visualize, a child who's 10 and now in diaper, so there was a lot of regression back. So that's why today I love sharing my story. I think the passion comes from all that, all the force behind it, when I share it, I feel like I'm so amazed and proud of everything that I was able to accomplish later on, which we'll get to, which is why Behold Be Gold exists. But I think just people who saw that miracle and saw that with their own eyes, including the medical staff that usually kind of just relies on statistics and really not, I think people just get stuck in like the, wow, like this is not possible kind of thing. And so after that year that I was inpatient, walking up and down, I do remember little things like I had the physical therapist come walk me up and down the flight of stairs. We would do a lot of that. I did have to wear an eye patch. My eye was very droopy, and I had to do a lot of work with my eye in the sense of exercises and try to get it back up. And I just remember being on steroids with my face so big and my eye being droopy, and I just remember just feeling like a monster. And I think that was a lot of my girlish, explain this, I felt very embarrassed of how I looked like. I just didn't realize how cancer, besides my hair falling out, made me now look like a monster. Really, that's how I can describe it. That's how I said it. Then after that year of inpatient, then I had more treatment, and little by little, I had a teacher that would come in and see me. I did do homeschool, but there was nothing ever that I could comprehend school-wise. The math, the sciences, even the retention, because it messed up my brain so much. There was nothing. I mean, I would be there to be there. There were days that there was no school at all because my energy was not there. But I wanted to be like everybody else. So I did want a teacher and all this. But I remember just not being able to comprehend, and my brain was just not right. And I knew that I was not right. And the people who surrounded me treated me like a little baby. And that also felt not right. But at the same time, that's how I got treated, like a little baby. And because at the same time, I didn't understand certain things, because I guess from what I understand today, my brain did go way back and I was literally effed up, and anyway, so we tried to do some normality, like I said, homeschooling, and seeing more normality at that time was being able to at least see friends every once in a while, not too much, but have that type of normality. My siblings as well, being able to go home and seeing my siblings and just having that sibling moment, playing video games, listening to music, whatever it was, being on the computer, AIM, MySpace, stuff that's today is different. But what else do I remember? The therapy dog coming, that having that also helped me cope. Going to the playroom helped me cope. Now we are, another year passes by, and I do start to rehabilitate, getting better in the sense of being able to be mobile more, being able to go down the stairs, being able to go up the stairs, being able to eat by myself, being able to take a shower by myself, being able to play video games on my own. Just stuff that before I couldn't. Keep going to the clinic, keep going to the hospital, and I went a lot to the neurologist because a lot of my problems were neurological. And after, I would say, this was in 2003, then I would say like in 3 years, 2.5 years went by, and I was able to go back to school and just go maybe twice a week, little by little, even. But it would be very fortunate if I even went for a whole day. But that usually lasted for a couple hours, and I would go really just to lunchtime and the nurse's station and sit in a class for like maybe 30 minutes. So little by little, I would be there. I also remember that this was a drastic change, and I really, really was very mad about. But going back to school, and now my parents telling me and the teachers telling me that, Juanita, you're not going to go back to the classrooms that you were in before. Now you're going to go to a special needs classroom. And that, Curtis, that was very, very hard. It was very, very hard. And I'm getting a little emotional like this because I can vividly remember that. And to me, that meant, again, that I'm different, like, even, I mean, it was a blessing going back to school, but now telling me that, I'm not going to be with the friends that I used to be in, the classes that I used to be with, the teachers that I used to be, in that sense of normality, it was very different. So now I'm in a classroom where I see where there's 5 teachers, where I see that the kids that were around me were physically, or maybe not physically, different than me, and I was just in a different world. And from there, I started to notice that I was getting more help, I was getting more attention, I was getting perhaps more flexibility. For instance, if I took like a test or a quiz or whatever it was, as far as like, don't feel pressure, Juanita, you got this, so I felt more. From there, I started seeing, how do I say this, the benefits of it, right? So then I was like, maybe Juanita, this is not too bad. And that took a while for me to think like that, but I started kind of seeing the positive side of things and not get too down on this happen. So that was a mentality that gradually and slowly started to come. And then in school, there were many times where I wore wigs, I wore hats. I did get made fun of, perhaps not to my face, but behind me. One time I remember boys were playing basketball, and I remember somebody just knocking my hat off, and I felt naked because when you're bald, you kind of feel like there's nothing up there. And of course, there's nothing up there. And obviously that moment was horrible, and I quickly put my hat up again and put it back on, and then I quickly went inside and felt very embarrassed, and I went to the bathroom and I started crying. And there was just so many feelings when I went back to school that were positive but also negative. I sometimes would eat in the bathroom because I felt very embarrassed when I had my steroid face. I didn't want to be in there. And then I also had really good friends who would be understanding. Sure, like, of course, they got their talks at home with their parents, telling their child, like, look, this child has this, or this teen has that. And then, yeah, I would say I grew up very blessed through my childhood cancer journey, having more positive experiences than negative ones in the school system. And what else? I finished my treatment around 2006. And forgive me, I have some notes here that yes, it took, and then around 2000, and then a few months later, we had a huge party when I finished my treatment. Huge. We called it the flush party, because we threw all my goodness, I can't even count with my fingers, but basically all these pills, many pills, we flushed them down the toilet. And we had a huge party. My brother, he's a musician, so he played, and we had a cookout, and friends and families and neighbors and community and the hospital people celebrated. Then a few months later, I remember I was now in 7th grade. I remember sitting in the classroom. Then a girl was rubbing my back or poking, like to get my attention real quick. And then I turned around, and then through my right eye, I started kind of like seeing blurry. But I didn't say anything. I was like, okay, Juanita, don't say anything, because this could be bad. And you know what bad means. You're going to have to go to the hospital again after the 3 years that you were in the hospital, 2.5 years, then you're going to have to go back, and don't say anything. Okay, now I'm in my teenage phase, right? So now I'm a little rebellious, and now I'm like, oh crap, this is whatever. This will fix on its own. So then next day went by, and then I started getting more blurry vision. And then the next day went by, and then I started getting more blurry vision. And then I couldn't see anymore through my right eye. Bad, Juanita. this is not good. And I know I was fearing more, not my eye, but my dad. I was fearing my dad. Just, I can already imagine him. He's super, super, well, just being a daddy, you have that within you that or a mom or a dad, just like, gosh, you very overprotective, which you have every right to be with. You have every right to be overprotective and everything. But of course, as a young teenager, you're just kind of like, oh gosh, I'm not gonna tell my dad or this and that. But so then, eventually, I had to tell my dad, and he's like, how long has this been happening for? Why didn't you tell me? This is not good. No, we're going to the hospital right now, And so I'm like, no, but So anyway, so that discussion went down, and so he's like, we're going right now. Anyways, we're driving to the hospital. We get to the hospital. We get to the clinic. We're still, every once in a while going back to the clinic. And we get there, and this was again like 5 months after, and they're like, hey, your appointment wasn't till like another month or something. And we're like, hey, my dad said, Juanita can't see. She can't see. And so anyways, exams went down, everything went down. As far as Brady, I had to get scans. I had to get scans of my eye, and going in through other machines that before I didn't go, like exams that before I didn't have. This time I had MRIs and EEGs and other stuff, and I get the results. My dad gets the results, and then I was surprised when he does cancer came back, and now I have a tumor in my eye. So what I've understood every time that I tell my story is that I had what's called a central nervous system relapse of the acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So just when I thought my life was getting back to normal, I then had this relapse, and now I'm in my teenage phase, adolescent phase, and I am now able to understand more, and I'm now able to look at this a little more maturely. Obviously, I'm very pissed that the doctors were like, your cancer came back. This means you're going to have this, and that, plus radiation, plus chemotherapy, plus this, plus that, plus your hair is going to fall out again. And all that was, again, traumatizing from the first time. But I was just hoping that how do I say this? I was hoping that it wasn't going to be as very traumatic and bad as the first time. And thankfully, at the second time, it wasn't, because I didn't have the stroke and I didn't have the coma. However, I did have to do other things for my eye, and I did have to skip some school that also affected in many levels. But I knew that it wasn't going to be as hard as the first time. And so really my attitude was more like, okay, let's just get this done with and let's go. And so another 2.5 years went by. So in total, I was in the hospital for 5 years, in and out, in and out, in and out. And the hospital became a home away from home. Really just, I knew what I needed to do. I knew where the cafeteria was. I knew who was coming. I knew the housekeeping person. I knew my therapist, the social worker, the child life specialist, the doctors. I became kind of like I would sit in front of with the nurses, and I dominated that nurses station there, and the doctors already kind of knew my personality. I knew their personality, and thankfully that part, when you get to know a hospital family very well, you kind of already know personalities of each individual and what's kind of how to approach things. And yeah, I don't know how to explain that, but basically they become your family, and that's the way it felt. So I felt that I could be myself, and like always, and really just tackle it. The second time, I would say that it was that what affected me the most was, again, most was the appearance part, but the not being able to attend now middle school, high school things, such as, for instance, like high school football games or soccer games or any type of sport event, and not being able to attend certain festivities because I was in the hospital, because I was not feeling so well. There was many big things that were happening, even if it's family related or if it was like school related, that really affected me. And also huge parts of, why I created Behold Be Gold was really shining a light on the late effects, which a lot of the late effects really bothered me, still bother me today, but I've learned to cope with them. again, not noticing why I couldn't be at a certain class. For instance, going back to the class things, my disability really, like, for instance, when everybody was driving, I couldn't drive because of my cognitive late effects. And so I would see everybody getting their driver's license, their learner's permit, and I would go and take the exam like 20 times and not being able to pass the 10 questions that they ask you. It was more of like the retention stuff and not being able to, I would have, like, I was a lot involved in like church groups, and I had one of my leaders, one of the church leaders, it was called Young Life, and I had one of my Young Life leaders try to help me with my exam, and I would go all the time to her house, and she saw how really sad I was about not being able to pass the exam, but everybody else was passing the exam, and it really aggravated me, and it really got me really, really mad that why can I not retain information? Like, I read a book in class and everybody was able to pass the class because they actually read and kind of memorized. I couldn't even memorize. So that type of cognitive stuff really, really got me really mad. And I remember being very fatigued at times as well, where I couldn't do a lot of things. I had also, my port was still in place just in case of anything, and I couldn't do sports. When I did do sports, if I were to do a sport, which I didn't do much, but I was either the one who would be helping out with the sports team, or even for me, it was very nice to be at the bench, just feeling part of a team. But at the same time, I couldn't understand the rules in the sense of like, you have to be alert and you have to like strategically know what to do. And I just couldn't retain that. So sports, I would say, weren't and still aren't ever my thing. But even when I watch a sport today, I'll just watch it and be with friends and talk and socialize. But I don't understand the rules. I understand basics. Just get the ball for soccer. Just get the ball in the goal, right? But for instance, other types of sports, it's very hard for me to understand. So when I socialize today with friends and they're like talking about sports and all this stuff, for me, I just don't understand that. And not just sports, there's other things, for instance, in school or even in life today at work, where I have to always have like basic rules, like basic bullet points is what I call it. I call the bullet point strategy. Just tell me the bullet points, 5, and then I can follow those steps, right? But that's how I was in school as well. And I did not have, I would say, a normal or typical experience for school, elementary, middle school, high school. It was I would not be going as much to classes or stuff like that, and would get the free pass out. But my goal was to graduate with my friends. So in my mind, I've always set high expectations for me, and I would wake up early. I would go to the teacher in the morning. I would stay lunch and I would eat lunch with my teacher. And then I would come after school. And then I would go to summer school. So I never had a summer during that time period of my life. It was all school, 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 because I needed to repeat and repeat and repeat. Now, while I'm facing these cognitive late effects, I'm also facing visual late effects. So my sight was not as good anymore like it used to be before cancer because of the radiation and the chemo, but mostly the radiation. Thankfully, I'm able to see with contact lenses and with glasses, and that is amazing. I know other people that have lost their vision, and that is a late effect for them. But that's just kind of like an example of a late effect. And another late effect was dental. So I had many dental visits, not here in the United States, but in my home country, because it's so expensive here. And so that meant every summer I had to go to my home country to get dental work, because that was also something that impacted my teeth, the chemo and the radiation. So I think we're talking now about plane tickets, right? We're talking now about more expenses right after you finish the treatment, and more embarrassment because I had to get some teeth out. And so now that's all within, me, anybody who feels embarrassed of their looks and appearance, which is pretty much a lot of people. So with me, I didn't know how to explain, like, what happened to your tooth. I mean, not a lot of people ask me what happened to my teeth, but it's noticeable, and I felt like I had to explain myself. And so it's just adding on another layer to, I have to explain myself. Why can't you drive right now? Well, I have to explain myself. I had cancer, what does a cancer have to do with this? So I noticed I grew up explaining myself, and many times, and it really becomes really annoying, and people not understanding, like, what does cancer have to do with your vision? What does cancer have to do with your teeth? What does cancer have to do with your brain? Like, how to, so I started noticing such a lack of awareness to all this. And I started noticing also that doctors were not really giving resources for after treatment or explanations. Let's get the child cured. Yes, priority. But and we don't want to, the thing I've noticed is, again, we don't want to scare people away after treatment by telling them all this information. However, I'm on a team that says, let's teach people, right? Let's teach people, let's get them educated. Let's just tell them about what this could cause this. At the same time, the priority is getting the child safe and sound and alive, and just getting them out there, and that's priority. Yes. I also feel that because of my experience, I also felt the need that, and because I got diagnosed a while back ago, I felt the need that I needed information. And then what happened later in my life, my dad moved away from the US because my whole story really left him traumatized. And now I'm an adult, and now he felt the need, like he took care of me for those 5 years straight of all this BS and losing jobs and working hard and, and all this stuff that not many people who are not in the childhood cancer world know about, right? You have to leave your job to take care of your child. You have to dedicate to your child's life. And so there's just many stories that I hear, I read, I lived it with me, with my family. And so my dad was ready to go and let me grow up here. Still, obviously, I still see him today and I visit and he comes and all this stuff. But the point's not that. The point is that he made closure. And he doesn't want to speak about it again because it was very traumatic for him, just like many other childhood cancer parents, caregivers, etc. So to this day, we don't really talk about what happened to me because if we talk, he'll start crying. So I need to find out what happened to me. And I never got a booklet. I never got something. I never know anything. So then I grew up now trying to seek for answers. Where did this come from? And where did that come from? And do I have this? Do I have that? Will I get this? Will I have that? Nobody ever told me anything. So that's in my location, right? Because I know other locations are very different and informative and all this. So I'm thinking more about my location. I graduated from, it was a miracle. I graduated from high school. It was amazing. I mean, everybody was amazed and everybody was like, good job, Juanita, pat on the back. You did it. You made it. Stay still. And so I was like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean stay still? No, I see my friends. I see them, how they're conquering and they keep going. And so your world revolves around what your friends are doing, what you should be doing. If you're not doing it, you're not in the right timeline. So like I said, like the trajectory completely changed for me, but I still wanted to accomplish that goal and do this and do that. So during high school, I had I had a special educational plan, of course, like not many, but some people do have this legal. I encourage everybody to look for these resources. You should have an advocate, but you also should have somebody to tell you like all the legal stuff for the school system and how that should work if you have a disability or if you have childhood cancer and you finished or you're not finished and you need those resources in school. Everybody has the legal right to have a plan of action because of the education and how you're doing in school. But so I did have that, and the person in school who was kind of like my mentor, later on she said, Juanita, I'm going to introduce you to another mentor, and this mentor is going to be your mentor now that you're going to college, because I wanted to do college, and probably it wasn't a 4-year college, but I wanted to at least hit those steps. So she said, you want to go to community college? I said, yes, I want to study child development. I want to be a child life specialist. I really can resonate with this and I want to do that. So at that moment, that was my goal. So we started with small steps, small goals. And so, okay, what do you need to do for that? I said, you need to have child development background. And so I went to community college with this new mentor, and this new mentor was like, hello, Juanita, I help you in life now. because you're not in school anymore, but this is, you have these services, you have these resources, we have scholarships, we have this, we have that. And my dad, before leaving, he said he was the one who helped me find all these individuals. And so I will always be grateful for my dad, not just for sticking with me through all those years, but also just not just leaving out of the nowhere, but also just getting me all these important resources, which a lot of people don't know about. So it was very important for me to grab all these resources and maintain with them. And so, because later in life, Behold Be Gold was born. And now what does Behold Be Gold do? Behold Be Gold gives these resources to other individuals who are going to need that help. So this new person came into my life. So he said, look, you need to think you're not like all those other people. You're not like your friends. Your friends did not go through childhood cancer. Your friends did not have to be in a coma for a month. Your friends did not have those, hard times in school, etc., etc. So you need to think of Juanita and your life and stop thinking about others, because those people are not going to think about you, and all this stuff. So he encouraged me and motivated me and empowered me to think and advocate for myself. And his name is Gary. And I'll never forget Gary. Gary was a really good friend through those years, a mentor. And then Gary's like, Juanita, you need to think about just thinking small. Start small and then think big. So what can you do? Can you take 3 courses? And I said, yes, Gary, I can take 3 courses. So what did I do? He helped me. He went with me to the community college and he spoke for me and he was my advocate. And he said, Juanita wants to get into community college. What do we need to do for that? So I went and took an exam. I did not pass the community college exam. I did not pass the exam to get into a community college. That's how bad my memory and cognitive stuff was, and my anxiety for taking tests and all this stuff. So later on, I had to take a non-credit class. So at the same time, while taking this non-credit class for a few months, I was like, okay, Juanita, get a job. So then I started getting a job in a Montessori school and learning, again, adulting, learning and doing these tasks and trying to work my brain. Right. And so now I'm taking care of little ones and learning how to do that, how to do this, how to do that. But anybody can do that, right? Anybody can do it, but not everybody. And not, the point I'm trying to make here is not, you're just not taking care of a child. For many people, even if they didn't have a disability, is not about taking care of a child. It's hard for anybody if you've never done it before. But the point I'm trying to make is that now I have this cognitive impairment and now I'm here and I'm doing this, but I started grabbing on to things that I am very good at, right? So that's where my empowerment came in, thinking of things where I am very capable of doing. And so that became like a second language to me, and the routines and then what I had to do and the schedule and all this stuff. So I felt very good at this job. And at the same time, I was taking this class for the non-credit class. And then eventually I was able to get into community college after a year. And at the same time, my friends would come back home from their 4-year college and talk to me about their 4-year college experience. And that made me feel sad inside that, Juanita, you're so behind. Juanita, see. So anyways, there were so many emotions happening. And I was noticing I was focusing so much, again, on what everybody was doing. Again, nobody in my classroom went through childhood cancer. So I'm battling all these things in my head, but at the same time, I'm ready to keep going. Eventually, I do get into community college, and that took a lot of work, a lot of effort as well. But I also hung on to that hope and motivation that you can do this, Juanita. And getting, again, this Gary was like, okay, we're going to get you a tutor. We're going to get you this. You're going to be able to graduate with, you're going to be able to get your associate's degree. I was able to get my associate's degree after 3 years. So then after 3 years, now my friends are getting their master's degrees. So, and I'm on my associate. So again, I'm looking at everything like, again, is this a competition? This is not a competition. You do you, Juanita. So then finally, after I get my associates, now I want to get my bachelor's degree. And so all this I am doing with new people from a community college who have no idea what happened to me, right? No idea. So then people, again, start asking questions. What is that scar? why are you going with that person? Why do you need a tutor? People just are so noisy, it's just like, you do you, I do me. But at the same time, I felt myself to explain myself. And if I ask for help, for instance, for like another student in the class, I feel like there is just kind of, I don't know, it becomes so annoying. It became so annoying. And at the same time, I got through it. But I always tell one person in the classroom, if something ever happens to me, as far as something health-wise, please call this number, which is my mom's number. So I've started learning to become more independent with that job, with this college stuff. And then I said, my parents, that at the time after community college, I had to get what's called I forgot what it's called, but basically an exam to check your neurology status, basically. I know that sounds funny, but it has a name. Neuropsycho exam, something like that. I don't know. But basically, it's like I go to a building and they check your cognitive abilities and how you're doing cognitively. And you have to be there for like 3 hours and you have to do all this stuff for your neurology. Sorry, not neurology, but how you're doing cognitively, a cognitive exam. So they say on there, and I have all the records. I have all the records because I love today showing and telling people. On that paper, it says, Juanita will never be able to go to college, will never be able to graduate, will never be able to learn a certain task, etc., etc. This. So this was and then on there, it said that I had a very, very low IQ. Basically, an exam that tells you that you will never make it in life and really puts your self-esteem really down. And guess what? I was able to contradict all that. And I was able to graduate from the college, the community college, and later on from 4-year college. So I told myself, Juanita, you're going to go to a 4-year college. And again, people were like, Juanita, don't, it's okay, patting my back. You already kind of prove what you needed to prove. And I'm not proving anything to nobody. I want to do it because I want to be on a certain field and I want to have a higher education and this and that. So I kept going and going and going. And after that, I applied to 3 colleges around my area. And I always had to keep in mind that of my health. And I've always been very conscious of my health and knowing that I need support. I need community. I know people. I need the hospital close to me. So I just applied to colleges nearby in case of anything. So I went and applied to 3 colleges and I got into Virginia Tech, which is I would say a really good school here in Virginia. And I was very proud of that moment when, of course, I got in, and I was very proud and people were very proud, and that's great. Like, I don't need the proudness around me, but I just felt like, wow, you can do this, right? For me, I felt, Juanita, you can do this. You can keep going. You don't have to let this define you. You don't have to this, what. So anyway, so I got into Virginia Tech. I started, everything was, of course, for everybody, something new is something different is frightening. And so I started telling myself again, Juanita, remember to take it easy. Like you have a special condition, not that everybody else has. And everybody, it's funny, I kept saying that because everybody's going through their own stuff too, right? So but I felt that I'm living my life, so I need to focus and be aware and be cautious. So I went into human development, which was much broader than child development. And through all that, I was able, my first semester, my first class, again, I told that one individual, I said to her, look, nice to meet you. My name's Juanita, blah, blah, blah. And I've always been very friendly and very just, I don't care. I'm just like, my name's Juanita. And quick side story, I had pediatric cancer. I know that's a lot, but that's not the point. The point is that I have a health condition. And if something happens, please call my mom. Anyway, so we come around like the end of the semester. And this was now in 2015. And so there's a huge class, 500 students, and I'm sitting beside that classmate who I became friends with. And so I'm just in the classroom, and then all of a sudden I collapse in front of everybody. And I'm like in the front of the classroom because I've always knew, because of my cognitive stuff, I always knew that if I'm in the front of the classroom, are the chances that I'm able to understand and retain, etc. So anyway, so I collapsed on the floor, and all I remember is waking up. And then my friend is in the nurse's station at the college. and she's looking down at me, and she's like, I called your mom. And so I was like, you told me to call your mom. I called your mom. And so, oh my goodness, don't we all want a friend like that? Somebody who really, understands and will do what you ask them to do. So in that aspect, right? So health is so fragile. So anyways, she called my mom, and my mom is like 45 minutes away. So my mom, she said, your mom's on your way. And then anyways, my mom is freaking the F out, and she was another individual who's like, don't go far. So I told her, I'm 45 minutes, it's not that bad. So anyway, so my mom gets there, and my mom, she's like, I'm moving here. And I'm like, what? You're moving to my college? And I had an apartment. And so she was like, I'm moving with you because you can't take care of your own. And so I said, I've been able to take care of mom for the past, semester. And she's like, no, I'm moving here. Anyways, at the same time, I met somebody. So then I'm like, this is awful. Like, this person that I met, I didn't even have shared my story with, because I'm not going to disclose that. I don't want to get into a serious relationship if it's not serious, right? I don't know what's happening. So these are all the things that a survivor of childhood cancer, or at least I, think about when in life. As I get older, as a survivor, you have to think of all these things, right? I'm not here to play games. I was in the hospital for many years. Now I need to focus in graduating college. I'm not gonna play around with some dude that is gonna break my heart or something. I'm here to focus, right? At the same time, I'm starting to meet somebody, but at the same time, I'm not gonna let this somebody know that I had childhood cancer. I don't want to scare this person away, all this stuff. So anyways, all these things are happening, and I collapsed, and now we just need to know why I collapsed. So I went to my local clinic, where I said, what's happening with my brain? What's wrong? Like, I need something that shows. I need to see my neurologist, my pediatric neurologist. So they sent me to the pediatric neurologist. They gave me a sheet. They gave me a packet. It's called Passport for Care. Actually, I have it right in front of me, right here. And so, because I was looking at these dates. So I get my Passport for Care in paper form, and they're like, look, this is everything about your treatment. These are all the 15, 16 types of chemotherapies you received. This was back in the day what happened to your stroke, but this and that, blah, blah. Anyway, so I'm like, why didn't anybody ever gave me this, right? Nobody ever gave it to me. I don't know what happened to me. Anyway, so they send me to I look for the neurologist. The neurologist is a pediatric neurologist. So I'm not allowed in, because now I'm in my 20s. And so then they're like, I'm sorry, doctor only sees kids. And I said, well, I really need to see this doctor. And they're like, I'm sorry, you can't see this doctor. And I'm like, well, I need to know what happened to me. And thankfully, this doctor still worked there. And they're like, I'm sorry. And so what did I do, Curtis? I stood there, and I cried, and I begged, and I said, please, 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 you don't know, I really, really need to see this neurologist. I don't know what happened to me as a child. I don't know what part of my brain is effed up, but I need to see this neurologist. So they saw, until I begged, until I cried, until I wept, they would finally let me see the neurologist. They said, you know what, what? So they called me 2 days later, because that happened that day. And then they're like, we'll call you, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so then I get there, I get my appointment. And then the neurologist went through everything with me. And then the neurologist was amazed and also like of how grown I've gotten, and amazed of how I'm doing, and amazed that I'm at college, and amazed that everything that said in my records that I was not able to do later on, and amazed that he saw me walking, because he saw when I couldn't walk. And oh my gosh, it was crazy. So I leave, and the receptionist says, did you have a good visit? And I said, yes. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you. This was a blessing. This was a prayer that was answered. I really appreciate it. They said, well, we're glad you saw him. This is his last day here. All these chills came through my body. And for me, that was another sign of energy in my life that meant, Juanita, you are doing what you're supposed to do. You keep advocating. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep preaching it. You keep spreading the word, So then I wrote that down somewhere too, the date, the time, everything. Oh my gosh. And then after that, I went and told my mom what happened. And then this neurologist led me to another neurologist in my area. All these neurologists in my area were like, we don't understand what's happening with you. We don't understand what childhood cancer has to do with you now. We don't understand this. We don't understand that. So then after seeing 4 neurologists here in my local area, they sent me to another like UVA, like 3 hours away from here, to see another neurologist, which they specialize more. So basically, I get there, I get my meeting, then I got diagnosed with epilepsy. And then the further examination they did, the further they saw that there's a part of my brain that just really got affected. And this all later on got explained to me by my childhood cancer oncologist, by my childhood cancer neurologist that I saw, that by just other individuals in the healthcare community that I saw later on, who were putting the pieces together and everything it took to put the pieces together. And that took quite a while to do that. And they told me that, Juanita, you have epilepsy. As soon as they said it, they kept going. And my head froze when they said you can't drive. Because after everything when I gained my independence again, which was a very short period of time, which was like when I was 16, 17, and then I was in college and now I'm like 20, 24. And I had a period in my life where I felt the most relieved and the most free, but it was a short period of time. But at the same time, I felt like I didn't have to deal with cancer. I didn't have to deal with anything, and I'm good. I'm set in stone. And then, Juanita, you can't drive, and you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. And so that took me back to the fluorescent lights, the chair, the doctor rubbing my back, diagnosing me with childhood cancer, then diagnosing me with childhood cancer again, and not allowing me to be just normal. And so all that really just got to me, and it would really just set me like in a frozen state of, the doctor kept talking and I just stayed frozen, like, what? Like, then all this, it meant hospital things again and medications again and all this other stuff. And so while that is happening, by this point, I already had built a relationship with my partner, but my partner, my significant other, he already knew about this. And I was very serious with him. And I told him, look, I'm going through this process that I just got diagnosed with epilepsy and this. Do you want to enter this life of chaos? And yeah, we're still together. We're hanging strong today. Things good. And, but that was like a little side note there. But at the same time, another side note, I did graduate from Virginia Tech. At the same time, I went to Washington, D.C. to do a child life program at Children's National. That was still one of my goals. And after that practicum that I did at Children's National, I came back, and that's when seizures hit harder. This was now in, when was this? This was now in 2019. And seizures started hitting harder because they were kind of gone through the Virginia Tech phase, but then they came back. And I noticed that my body was giving too much. I was working too hard that I always tell people that perhaps in that time where I was trying to really think and do all this stuff, my body, my brain unlocked a key that said, okay, let's let these seizures come out. And so then I started getting the seizures after that practicum, but at the same time, I wanted to continue with this goal. So I kept volunteering at my local children's hospital. I volunteered there for 7 years with the child life department. And then eventually I got an assistant job for child life. But then I started noticing that the work and everything my body was giving was making me more ill. So that's when we get to the part also that when you're an adult, it's very hard depending on the late effects. Each type of late effect is going to impact your health, and it's going to impact your work ethic or your school ethic, right? And it's gonna put barriers in your life. 19, when I got diagnosed with the epilepsy, I went home and I remember being on the couch crying again and weeping and crying and furious and mad and throwing shit around and really just aggravated for a whole week. And I've never ever been depressed in my life besides during my childhood cancer phase. But after that, I was solid fine. And then they told me this. And then a whole week of depression, not wanting to leave the house, not wanting to do anything. And my partner, Abraham, he was there with me and helping me through everything. And he said, it's going to be okay. And obviously, the last thing you want to hear from somebody is you're going to be okay, right? So, are you in my body? No. Are you going through what I'm going? No. So, but anyways, I stayed in the couch, and then all of a sudden I felt this energy within me. I felt an energy, like the energy that got me out of that state of coma, that maybe things are going to be okay. But we have to look at things through another perspective, just like when I was in the classroom with looking things at another perspective. And instead of crying about it, let's get up, let's take action, let's do something, and so I did, and I got up and I started writing words that were just coming within my body. And I started saying, behold, 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 behold. I jumped up and I looked at Abraham, and Abraham's like, are you crazy? And I'm like, behold, behold, behold. And again, he's looking at me like, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? Do you need, something? And I was like, behold, behold, give me a pen, give me a pen real quick. He got me a pen. So he got me a pen. And then I started writing, behold, behold, is to perceive an unstoppable force of positivity, ambition, and resiliency that arises within you while undergoing the barriers and obstacles that come with surviving childhood cancer. So I wrote that down. And then I wrote that down and I said, Juanita, you hang on to these words because something is going to come out of it. And I did. And I told Abraham, he's very tech savvy. And I told him, look, let's do a website. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to do a website. We're going to start sharing my childhood cancer story, plus what we're going through right now, what I'm going through with late effects, plus all the other types of survivorship shit that I've been going through the past years. And why isn't anybody talking about it? Then I started Googling, and at this time, there wasn't much survivorship awareness like there is today. We're still missing survivorship awareness, but at that time, there wasn't as much. What I'm trying to say is like, when I go to CureFest, now I'm hearing more stuff about how we can help survivors. But back then, there wasn't speeches about how can we help survivors. So we've made some progress, but at the same time, there's still so much to be done. So I started this platform, and I call it a platform because literally it started out with a website, just kind of sharing stories, just started sharing kind of like the little advocacy awareness work, getting involved with Children's Miracle Network, getting involved with Really for Life, getting involved with like a American Cancer Society thing that I did, just little by little things that I've been doing through awareness for cancer, for childhood cancer. I then connected with other survivors, it's weird, but I started connecting with childhood cancer survivors outside of the United States, not so globally instead of here. And that was because I hashtagged it, and somebody from the UK was going through similar things that I was, including the seizures, the coma, the other stuff. And I was like, wow, her story is kind of similar like mine. And so then I reached out to her, and then she started educating me about late effects and how in the UK there's all this type of late effect stuff happening there. And so I'm like, really? Because there's really not a lot, not that I've known up here. And so then we started connecting and vibing. And so then I started interviewing her. Then I started getting more interested in all this late effect stuff. And the more I researched, the more I could feel connected, the more I understood my body, the more I could understood why things were happening to me, either physically or emotionally, socially. I started thinking of all this other stuff that I'm like, wow, this is, how can I've never learned about this or knew about this? So then, behold, I started just reaching out to this person who led me into like policy stuff. And she said, look, we're going to the Capitol on this day. You should come. You should tell your story. You should do that. Here, I'm like a few hours away from Richmond, Virginia. So then also here in Virginia, locally, I started doing that. So notice how I'm saying locally, I told you globally, and now nationally. So I started kind of seeing a thing where in my head, I'm like, this is something that could be talked about not just here in my hometown. This could be something that's talked about nationally as well and globally. So then I started kind of putting stuff on the website about local work, national work, global work. And I'm very blessed that I speak Spanish. So I started also kind of talking to Spanish speaking people about late effects, like researchers and other people who are involved in the childhood cancer community as well. So after that, I started putting more stuff. I started interviewing. I started doing advocacy work. I started doing research work. I started doing socials on virtually because COVID happened during this era as well. I started connecting with so many people online, survivors, connecting with them in many levels. I started doing a YouTube channel. I started doing little socials as far as like getting together after COVID. Like virtually, but also after COVID, like in 2022, we started doing little connection works. I had parents reaching out to me saying, wow, this is amazing. Your site exists. I've been trying to fight with the people in the school, the people for my child at work. I'm with this. My child had a brain cancer and now they're having a hard time driving. Nita, do you have a connection? I do have a connection. I gave them that connection. The child is now driving today. There's just many things that I started noticing that Behold Be Gold, the platform itself, was doing. Now, we are not a nonprofit yet at that time. So then I started seeing how all these things aligned and that there was so many things that we need a beta user to use this survivorship toolkit, the survivorship app, the survivorship, whatever it was, survivorship late effects, Juanita is involved in and is ready to help out. So I started writing a list of all the things that Behold Be Gold has done with so many people, with so many communities, with so many networks around. And so then I see that there's just so much. There's so much over the past 6 years. Behold Be Gold has been a nonprofit. A platform. Right now, in fact, at the beginning of the month, we just became incorporated because we want to be able to reach more people. And so we are in the process very soon of becoming a 501c3, which I'm proudly say I'm very excited about it because there's been so much work that has been behind the scenes and just a lot of work with Behold Be Gold in general, where I, in my head, said, we literally are a nonprofit. We just are not legally a nonprofit, right? This is a platform and a movement, but we're becoming a nonprofit. So there's just many things that I see there that in the growth of it. And I started becoming Juanita, we have to have a mission. What's your mission? The mission is going to be Behold Be Gold is to empower, right? Because we go back to the word empowered, because that's what I felt. I felt empowered. Why did I feel empowered? Because I had the support. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, not at the end, but really in just gaps that now I felt like I have been empowered just by that attitude and that mentality that you can do it and the motivation and the drive. So I know there's many survivors out there that are struggling with late effects. I know that for sure. And they're just scared to speak up and they're scared to tell their teacher and they're embarrassed to feel like not normal, right? Because I had all those feelings and there's many things that they may be feeling. And it's just one of those things that we want at Behold Be Gold, we want to be a space where you're free to speak and you're free to talk about it and really just feel empowered and not see it as a bad thing, but really see it as like a gift that you have in the sense that, look, because you're here, you're alive, you're supposed to do something with this. Now you don't have to, but you could also do something with it. And instead of looking at it as a negative thing, see it as a positive thing because you're here breathing and that is a gift. And that, to me, it took a while to kind of see, but for the past, I would say 10 years now, I see it as like a miracle, which it really was from the beginning. But I just see it like, wow, after everything that I've gone through, and this is not just me, right? Behold Be Gold is not just me, and I want to emphasize that to many people. This is not just me. I started it, but really I'm talking about a group of people who are not seen and need to be heard and need to be helped and need to be supported, and not just them, but their families, because you can't, it goes together. The childhood cancer, it's affecting the child, but it's also affecting their nuclear system around them, right?